Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nichecast, the second Nichecast of the week. Hope you're doing well across Aotearoa. We are from the Niche Case, the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sport. Weekly Flying Kiwis wrap is live. We've got the Warriors versus Knights written preview. Also got a Kiwi-NRL written preview. They are both live on the website. NRLW will be coming tomorrow. There's a Tall Blacks World Cup debrief. And on the topic of World Cup basketball, I have been sitting with the idea that if Steven Adams was playing for the Tall Blacks would have been ferocious. Just the rebounding and how valuable Steven Adams is in that regard. And then you look at how international basketball is played, why the USA have a habit of underperforming. Yeah, sure. The big Donnies aren't playing. The best players don't really care. But also the USA don't have a big man grabbing rebounds. And when you look at how Jaren Jackson Jr. performed for the USA, and you think about the combination he has with Steven Adams at Memphis, to me it reinforced how valuable Steven Adams is for Memphis, but also if Steven Adams was playing for the USA, they win. Quite simple, because they don't have a lot of rebounding, and Steven Adams is the best rebounder in the NBA. So we don't want Steven Adams to play for the USA, but if he was, they'd be unbeatable. With a C team, with an E team, whatever team you want to put out there, you chuck Steven Adams in the USA team, they'll win.
I mean, when the Memphis Grizzlies play against, Philadelphia and Joel Embiid, I know Jaren Jackson Jr. is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, but who do you reckon guards Joel Embiid? Because it's not Jaren Jackson Jr. if those two guys are both available. It's Steven Adams. When they play against Milwaukee, it's a little bit different because Giannis gets into some other situations as like a ball handler. But when he's hanging in there as center, that's Steven Adams' job, and definitely, absolutely, when they're playing the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic of the best team in the world, Denver Nuggets, not the world champions, but the best team in the world. Those are different things. Who guards Jokic? It's not Jaren Jackson Jr. if Steven Adams is out there. It's Steven Adams. We saw that a few times last year because those are two Western Conference teams who meet relatively often. I mean, that's not to take anything away from Jaren Jackson Jr. It's to say that that is a mean combination that those two have. And that combination makes each of them better. And yeah, it's, that American team with someone like Steven Adams would be just that American team, not just an American team, but that specific American team with all the really good defenders and the hungry young players, With Steven Adams, that team's insane. That's the problem with American basketball at the moment is who can do a Steven Adams job for them? Because all of those guys are international players, all the best rebounders in the league right now. Like if they had like a Sabonis or someone like that, that would do the same trick. But he's like Lithuanian or something. All these best rebounders are not Americans. But if Steven Adams had played for the Tall Blacks as well, I mean, it's not just obviously if you've got one NBA player and that NBA player isn't available, you're going to be a weaker team. Like that's what we're talking about on Tuesday about like take the Warriors Dally M candidate out of the picture, they're going to be worse. Well, multiply that by like 10 because the NBA is that far ahead. That's what the Tall Blacks are dealing with without Steven Adams, but also it's not just that. Like even if all the rest of those guys were NBA player versions of themselves, the thing that he provides for that, or the thing that he hypothetically would provide in a situation where he was playing for the Tall Blacks, which he might well have been doing this time around. Like, there was some positive talks until he got injured. It's the rebounding, the protecting the rim, some finishing inside on the paint, that kind of stuff. It's like these were the weaknesses of that Tall Blacks team, and they're the strength of Steven Adams' game. You chuck him in there, he doesn't just improve the team because of his individual performances. He makes everyone else better around him because he covers for the things they can't do, allowing them to do the things they do. that would have been a hell of a team, and it was a frustrating thing in some ways to see the Tall Blacks out there battling without Steven Adams, but without also, you know, the Webster brothers, Abercrombie, Rob Lowe, Sam Wardenberg, even like some of these dudes that just weren't available for the World Cup, weren't quite at their peak and like the pinnacle event, which was frustrating, but also it's still the Tall Blacks, so you know we still got next man up mentality. Everyone out there giving it a hundy and doing what they could. It was a fun experience, but Steven Adams in international basketball is something I do hope we see at some point.
You mentioned you mentioned the world champ thing, and that was a little wave of news and controversy maybe in America.
Yeah,
It was
it
very
was
interesting.
so weird though.
It was very interesting because like the Americans don't realize that everyone from outside of America laughs whenever NBA, MLB, NFL, NHL, whenever they put the world champion thing out there, which they do every season, everyone outside of America is like, what's going on? You're not world champions. You just won the American League. But when an American says it, then they have this like weird kind of like discussion about it, not knowing how they are perceived around the world. And I've actually like crystallized this a bit. I've simmered it down to a jus. The argument is that the NBA is the best league in the world and it has the best players from around the world. That's great.
Correct. Yeah.
So NRL, best rugby league competition in the world. Best players from around the world come to the NRL. Are the Panthers back-to-back world champions? What? No, they're NRL champions, and then you have the World Cup to decide who is the world champion. If you're the Olympic champion, you are the Olympic champion. You can discuss which is more valuable in basketball, Olympic champion or World Cup champion, which is the world champion. Either way, world champion status comes from international tournaments. It doesn't come from the Americans deciding they are champions of the world because you won the American League. And again, obviously Americans don't care about the NRL. They don't know about the NRL. But they will know about the Premier League.
Well, Champions League football, yeah, like similar thing.
Premier League football is the best league in the world, like domestic league, with the best players want to play Premier League football. Man City aren't world champions. No, that's what the World Cup's for. But again, for us in this corner of the world, how bonkers would it be to say the Panthers, like an amazing rugby league team, how bonkers would it be to say that they are world champions just because we think the NRL is the best league in the world? It's insane, but again, it shows you how whipped up in themselves America can be. And now we've got, as you said, the best players, the MVP candidates, they're not American. Steven Adams, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Steven Adams. Like, none of those dudes are American. So I just had to get on my own high horse and tell Americans that everyone else from outside of America hates this idea of calling yourselves world champions, and B, bringing it back to local context. If your mate at the pub saying the Panthers are the world champions, you're going to be having a giggle right in his face.
Even though the Panthers are probably the best rugby league team in the world.
Yeah.
It's still probably true, but world champions is not something that comes about that way. World champions is an earned title from winning a world championship, which has to include the world. That's how that goes. Man, that was such a weird thing, because even some of the podcasts I listened to, the NBA ones, where they were talking about this, like the dude, it was Trey Lyles, I think his name is, the American sprinter, who said this, which is obviously trying to get a little bit of publicity for him and his sport. Like, we can't ignore that. But then some of these podcasts were talking about him like he's the clown because he was trying to publicize himself and use this as a little like lever for a little bit of clout. but he was still right. Like, even though he was doing it in a little bit of a corny way, he still had a point, and that point was entirely missed, which was so weird watching all these NBA players just like jump in on him. Especially who was it? It was like Devin Booker or someone like that tried to claim like, yeah, and I can beat you in the 200 meters. It's like, no, you can't. He's the fastest man in the world. This is insanity. But I guess the NBA has a little bit of a the NBA did have a literal bubble going for a little while there. I think the NBA also has a bit of a figurative bubble around it, which is it's good and it's bad.
Yeah,
Self-awareness
we'll stop there.
isn't a major thing, but it does add to the sport in other ways.
We don't need to get into the American psyche too deep.
No, there will be here all day in that case.
Weirdos. Shout out to our Substack newsletter. You can sign up every Monday and Friday. We send out our newsletter full of Aotearoa sports notes and nuggets, as well as all the links to the stuff we write for the website and all the podcast information. It's a hub of the Niche Cache, the nichecache.substack.com. Look forward to that tomorrow evening. And there is the paid Substack option as well. If you upgrade your Substack subscription, then you can access our weekly subscriber podcast, which earlier in the week we did a deep dive into Blackcaps cricket. So that's there for all paid Substack subscribers and the Patreon whānau. If you don't want anything to do with Substack, you can just join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/EL Niche Cache, Niche Cache, and you can access the subscriber podcast there every week. Big up to the Patreon whānau and everyone with a paid Substack subscription. Helps us out a lot. Easy way to directly support the Niche Cache. And if you can't afford that, all good. You can just hit a like. You can click on an ad on the website. You can tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter X. You can follow us on Instagram. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can hit the like button on YouTube as well. You can do all sorts of things for free, but there is that other option if you do want to partake in supporting the Niche Cache directly, straight up the guts, with a donation or a subscription. Kia kaha. Anything else intro-y? No. Mindfulness. Your turn.
Mindfulness. Poet William Butler Yeats. We are happy when we are growing. Nice and simple today.
We are happy when we are growing. And that's when you think about the opposite. When you're stagnant, when you're in purgatory, that gets tricky. There's not much happiness to be found in stale bread. There's not much happiness in stale bread, but if you're growing, if you're making progress, even if it's just a small step each day, that's a seed of happiness right there.
Yeah, and that is a nice open concept as well, the idea of growth, because that can come in a myriad of different ways, and which divert your attention wherever you find your own personal growth to be heading, and then feed upon the happiness, I suppose. The happiness, like the fruits of the trees. If you take that growing metaphor a little bit further, the plants grow, they fruit, you eat the fruit is your happiness. I guess that's your reward, I suppose, is the way to put that.
Beauty. Hope everyone out there is growing in some sort of fashion and making a bit of progress on your daily mahi, your daily journey. We have another round of NRL finals football coming up this weekend. Storm versus Roosters and Warriors versus Knights. We'll start with Warriors versus Knights. And I was looking at, I'm trying to respectfully poke holes in the Knights. One of them is you've got Adam Clune coming in at halfback, assuming Jackson Hastings doesn't play. Adam Clune misses 4.6 tackles a game. Jackson Hastings misses 1.5 tackles a game. Easy nugget, little weakness in the Knights defensive line to target. Boom. Knights have been on this
Dragons legend Adam Clune.
Yeah. You know you're in a bad spot when you've got like players like Adam Clune just like shuffled out the
Guy who
door.
got let go by the second bottom team. Yeah.
Yeah. And the same thing with Fetalainga Ponga. We've said this a few times over the past few weeks. 2 seasons with the Tigers. He's told he doesn't have a future at the Tigers. I actually read that he moved back to Brisbane and he was unloading containers, and then the North Sydney Bears and the Roosters got in touch with him to play reserve grade. So you're not good enough to play for the Tigers, and now you're playing NRL finals for the Roosters. Some of these clubs are just so far up their own up backside, it's funny. I digress. The Knights. A lot of their wins on this win streak have been against weaker opposition. They've either been home games or their away games, like a trip to the Dragons, were against weaker opponents. It's not like the Knights went to Melbourne and defeated Melbourne. It's not like the Knights went to Penrith and defeated the Panthers. The Knights have been rallying behind their home crowd, and they've had a lot of home games in the back end of the season, and that's their win streak. And I don't know that when you combine that with like the missing Jackson Hastings, missing Lachlan Fitzgibbon, having to go to Auckland and play against the Warriors at Mount Smart Stadium, there is a very easy storyline about the Knights not quite being as good as they may appear. And that's a dangerous thing to say at this stage of the week, coming into this game against the Warriors. But it's all there. Like, if the Knights have Jackson Hastings, it's a different kettle of fish, because Jackson Hastings, he does all the kicking for the Knights. 307 kicking meters per game. Gamble and Clune average 160. So Jackson Hastings is your main kicker. He's your halfback, directing all the traffic, freeing up space for Ponga. He's also a good defender. Adam Clune does less kicking and misses like 3 times as many tackles. When you combine that with the getting into the weeds, into the mangroves of the winning streak the Knights are on, it does feel like the Knights' buzz is going to be... it's going to be a case of like, to me, it feels like the Warriors going to the Panthers, the Knights are coming to Warriors. And it's never that easy, but it's kind of, that's just the storyline context floating around this game for me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, the 10-game win streak. It starts at the beginning of July. So it's a long time since they last lost a game. But it begins with a 66-0 win away to the Bulldogs. Congratulations, it's the Bulldogs.
I think
then they beat the Tigers, Storm. They did 6. So 6 of these, so Tigers, Storm, Raiders, Dolphins, Bulldogs again, Rabbitohs, and then Sharks, Dragons, and Raiders in Golden Point in the finals. 6 of those 10 games were at home. The 4 away games were that Bulldogs won. The first Bulldogs won. A nice handy win over the Raiders, a 2-point win over the Dolphins, and then a 20-point win over the Dragons. So I think that's one finals team away in that 10-game streak, and it was the Raiders who they then beat at home only just in the finals later on. So you can't really poke holes in a 10-game winning streak because it's still a 10-game winning streak. But if you're going to look for some kind of some kind of soft landing on there for Warriors fans, that is probably it. Is that perhaps as far as 10-game win streaks go, it's been there's been some convenience involved as well as them, as well as Kalen Ponga playing some outstanding footy and whatnot. And the team's clearly firing, team's clearly confident, but a few things did go their way in terms of the draw as far as that goes. It's not like they had beaten, the game directly before the 10-game win streak was a 20-12 loss away to the Panthers. Like if they'd won that game and it was an 11-game win streak, then we're talking about something different, but they haven't had a statement win like that, other than like laying down hidings upon some of the weaker teams in the competition.
Generally, if your win streak features 2 wins over the Bulldogs or 2 wins over the Tigers, It's a bit of a weird win streak, and I'm not buying into it a great deal. But shout out to the Knights. Obviously, Greg Marzhew, Mangadies Jr., Leo Thompson, Napier, Maris Jr., they're part of that Knights team. And I wrote this morning in my Kiwi-NRL preview about Leo Thompson. He's going to play an interesting role specifically in stopping Adam Whenua-Blake, I reckon, because he has a defensive focus. He's made the second most tackles for the Knights this season behind Phoenix Crossland, averages 30 tackles a game. And he is a very good defender. He's big, he's mobile, and the Knights with Marzhew, with Dominic Young, Bradman, Best, Dane Gagai, the Saifidi brothers, Tyson Frizzell. Like, there's a lot of runners in that Knights team, and Leo Thompson doesn't necessarily have to take 15 runs a game. That's why his meters are never as eye-catching as other players, but he does put that effort into the defense, and I think he's going to be crucial in stopping Whenua-Blake. So watch out for him. The Warriors, it's basically Sean Johnson's back, hopefully, and you've got everything else is pretty stock standard, including the bench. And this is an interesting idea because the Knights, we've seen them, Greg Marzhew and Dominic Young are among the best try scorers in the NRL because the Knights go to either edge, and Kalen Ponga is going to either edge. He had been like a more left side focused player. Now he's popping up on the right edge and the left edge, usually 2 passes wide. The Warriors are going to need to chase from sideline to sideline, basically. And you don't want too many big bodies if that's your defensive plan. So that is, this has been a key thread throughout the season, is the smaller, more mobile, versatile bench. And we talked about it a lot. Like Bunty Afo has dropped out of the rotation. Tom Ale was Mr. 10 meters per run. He's dropped out of the rotation. Now, for a finals game, you've got a bench of Dylan Walker, Jazz Tavanga, Bailey Siren, and Josh Curran. We've seen it before, and now we're seeing it for finals. And I think that is a bench, and this is a Warriors forward pack. They might not be able to stop Ponga, but they will chase from sideline to sideline. They will chase the inside channels for any traffic going back through the middle. Shans Nickel-Klokstad is a good tackling fullback. So he might be able to make a tackle on a line break. And if he can snuff out a line break or do his best, and you've got players chasing back, suddenly that line break becomes a tackle instead of a try. And the speed, Dylan Walker, he's probably going to be the fastest forward on the field. And that's just something nifty to think about. Who is the fastest forward on the field? It's Dylan Walker. And that, I'll get into the halves combination in a second, but when Dylan Walker's playing in the halves for the Warriors, he's not playing in the middle. So suddenly the Warriors do not have the fastest middle forward on the field. When Dylan Walker's coming off the bench to play in the forward pack, that's what he offers: speed and passing. And if you think about Bailey Sirenin, he's a back rower middle forward. Josh Curran's a back rower, usually playing on an edge. Jazz Tavanga is a small prop, essentially. Those dudes are mobile, they're nimble, they're agile, they're skillful. They might not be as big and robust as Daniel Saifidi or Jack Hetherington. And this could be an issue against bigger teams like the Broncos or the Panthers, but against the Knights, who are going to push the footy out to their edges, you just want blokes who don't stop moving, pretty much. Keep your feet moving, keep covering the inside channels, chasing when you need to chase, resetting when you need to reset without blowing a gasket because you're tired. That is a strength, I believe, for the Warriors, specifically in this matchup against the Knights.
Yeah, old Dominic Young has 25 tries for the season, which is leading the competition, and Greg Marzhew has 21, which is third equal. One of the guys he's third equal with is Dylan Watene-Zelezniak, also has 21 and is gunning for that Warriors record, which I can't remember what it is, but I think it might be 23, something like that. I think he already has the regular season record. The other guys who have scored as many as him or more have cashed in on finals runs as well. So that's cool. But quiz question: who's the second top try scorer for the Warriors? Because I had to think about this I had to look it up to see. Knights have two guys with 20 plus. Warriors have one guy on 21, and then who's second?
I will say the Knights, I think only Bradman Best is the other dude in the top 50 on the NRL.com rankings. So that's where my idea about them going to the edges comes in, because their try scorers are the edge players, where the Warriors, Fanua Blake scored a few tries, Tohu Harris has scored a few tries. I don't think they're the next in line. I'll say Nickel Klukstar.
Nickel Cookster has 6, which is fifth equal. That's the same as Egan and Metcalf. Marcelo Montoya has 9. But the funky thing about that is third equal is Sean Johnson and Fanua Blake, who both have 8. So Fanua Blake could score through the middle in this one, and he'd be second equal. I think Bradman Best, I was looking at this before just to check the try scorer things. I think you're right, he is the next best, but it's a drop off. He's sort of got 10 or 13 or something around that range. But I think he's also second to Ponga for try assists for the Knights. I might just check that again, which adds to that same thing, doesn't it? Because that's the center that's going through the hands, center to wing scores kind of thing.
We talked about this ahead of the Panthers game. Te Maire Martin and Sean Johnson. The whole idea of Te Maire Martin's skill set and his short-sider attacking ability, well, if Sean Johnson's not playing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was a bummer, especially when you've got Dylan Walker in the halves and neither of them. Yeah, forget the Panthers game, but that, like, everything there applies now for the Knights game. And I think I did have a development pondering this where, like, for Te Maire Martin to do his best short-sider work, you need the big shape stretched out to the other side of the field. So that's where having Sean Johnson in the team, he's directing, he's setting up the shape, he's a threat himself. So the open side, they need to make sure they got the right numbers. They need to be maybe doubling up on a certain little pocket. That's when Te Maire Martin can shine as a short-sider. Sean Johnson is stretching out the open side, and that leaves even numbers with lots of space for Te Maire Martin to work in on the short side. If the defense, and the Panthers, great defensive team, if the defense is well set up on the short side and there's no momentum for the Warriors, then the short-sider idea doesn't really apply. But if you've got Sean Johnson on the open side with all of his options, with all the options of Harris, Fanua Blake, starting with Wade Egan, if all those little, I'm gonna bring in the rugby union parlance here with the pods. Rugby Union World Cup, you've seen a lot of the pods. So you get a catcher and he's got the two guys basically in his pocket. They hit it up. They set up the ruck. Bang, quick ball. The Warriors, their shape, you've got those pods. They're not the same pods, but a pod is just a good way to view it. The first pass from Wade Egan, it goes to Tohu Harris, Walker, Fanua Blake. That's a pod. He's got a short ball. He's got a pass out the back. Pass goes out the back. It's another pod. You got a short ball. You got a pass out the back. Then you get to Johnson. He's got Niokore running short. Nickel Clockstar out the back. That's another pod. Checkpoints, pods, batteries, pockets, sections, whatever you want to call it. That's how the Warriors attack. And if each one of those pods is set up on the open side with Sean Johnson, then it takes a lot of attention away from Te Maire Martin on the short side. And his inclusion and getting another game, playing alongside Sean Johnson, that is going to be important for the Warriors in scoring points against the Knights. And the Knights, I don't think they are a great defensive team. They conceded, like, Yeah, you sure you scored points against the Raiders. Everyone can score points against the Raiders. The Warriors have done it twice this season. They're close games because they create chaos, and they created chaos against the Knights. But I don't think the Warriors will have issues scoring points against the Knights, especially with the Martin Johnson halves combination.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it in that kind of picture. I mean, for one thing, Tamati Martin played for the Panthers as well, so it's not like they're going to be unaware of what he offers. They know he's that sort of little like the short side assassin type. But even Johnson, if he's at 80% in this game, because he's like a triple threat type player who can run, pass, or kick, because of that, and kick in a variety of options, pass in a variety of options as well. He's got the cutout ball, he's got the short ball to big man running off him kind of thing. You have to respect him. Like, you have to give him that defensive gravity, even if you think maybe he's not going to run as much because maybe he's not he's not at 100% fitness or whatever, and maybe he will be. Like, he might be fine. He's had 2 weeks to recover, so that might not even be an issue. But that's definitely something where he is just his presence of play. It's a reason why you would play him even if he is at 80 or 90% as well, because just his presence is going to fix the shape for the Warriors across the whole width of the field. It's not just what he can do specifically. It's the fact that because he has that variety, you gotta give him that respect, and that allows others to do what they do. That Knights try assist thing gets even better because Bradman Best has 13 tries. He also has 15 try assists. So he's actually got more try assists than he does tries. Kalen Ponga is their leading try assist maker. No surprises there. There's the fullback sweeping in there and played a bit of halves as well as chipping in, hands on the ball a lot, making those last passes. Sweet as he's got 21 try assists. Their third top try assist maker is Dane Gagai, the other center, who has 13. If you look at the Warriors, Sean Johnson, 27 try assists. No one else has double figures, but it's actually Pompey and Berry who are next with 9 and 8, respectively. So there's a little bit of a tail of the tape there, I think, as to these two teams.
When you did say Pompey and Berry try assisters as well, which is similar to the Knights centers, but I think when you combine the try scorers and the try assisters, you find a lot more variety in how the Warriors score their tries compared to the Knights. And I think that makes it easier for the Warriors to stop the Knights scoring tries, and it makes it harder for the Knights to stop the Warriors scoring tries, because if the Knights overcompensate to try and stop Fanua Blake hitting a hole, to stop Tohu Harris in the middle with time and space, even if they overcompensate on Wade Egan. Wade Egan, I think he was the best dummy half against the Panthers on the field. I think he's going to be the best dummy half in this game as well. If the Knights overcompensate to slow down Egan in the middle, he's just firing a no-look pass out to the first pod, hit the second pod, hit the third pod, bang, we're hitting the space on the edges. But if the Knights overcompensate on Niokore hitting a short ball, Jackson Ford hitting a short ball, but then Fanua Blake's going through the middle. Tohu Harris is going through the middle. And that variety, I think, is going to work in the Warriors' favor in attack and defense against the Knights, who, especially with Jackson Hastings out, it's going to be interesting to see if the Knights are able to shift the footy how they want to, how they have in their winning streak, featuring 2 wins over the Bulldogs.
And the Knights have played the Warriors twice this year. The first was in round 1, which I believe was in Wellington, wasn't it? And the Warriors won that one. Next was in round 6. The Knights won at McDonald's Jones Stadium. That was in April, though, so it feels like those were a long time ago. And I'm not sure how much we can take from that, but it does add to the thing, like, the home team won both times. Warriors are going to have a massive home crowd. That does feel like the biggest factor in this game.
We, of course, also have the Roosters versus the Storm. And I realized this morning that across the 2 finals games this weekend, 8 wingers are named, 2 for each team, 4 teams, 8 wingers. Only one of them is, actually, given that Marcelo Montoya is a Fijian international, none of them want to play for Australia. Some of them are Aotearoa Kiwis wingers. Some of them, like Remus Smith and Marcelo Montoya, born and raised in Australia, but Remus Smith seems to be in the Aotearoa Kiwis mixer. As I said, Montoya's playing Fiji. So we'll go through the wingers named for these two games. Will Warbrick, he's from Kawerau. Remus Smith, son of Tyron Smith. So he's Indigenous, and Tyron Smith's from Aotearoa. So he's opting to play for Aotearoa Kiwis, I believe. Fetalainga Ponga, Glenora Jr. in Auckland, he's Samoan. Jackson Paulo, Northcote Jr. in Auckland, he's Samoan. Warriors have Dylan Watene-Zalesniak, Narua Wahia, Marcelo Montoya on the other wing. The Knights have Greg Mazu, Mangere East Jr., and Dominic Young, England international. So when I first wrote this down, it was 7 out of the 8 wingers are either Kiwi-NRL juniors or don't want to play for Australia. Now that I've chucked in Marcelo Montoya, it's 8 out of 8. 8 out of 8 wingers in this weekend's NRL footy are either Kiwi-NRL juniors or they do not want to play for Australia because they're playing for Fiji or they're playing for England. So shout out to that.
NBA big men and NRL wingers.
There you go. The Storm. They've got Warbrick and Smith on their wings. Jerome Hughes from Wellington, he's in the halves. Nelson Asafa-Solomona's on the bench, and there's a little interesting nugget here. Alec MacDonald, I've talked a lot about him this season. Initially from Auckland, moved to Australia as a youngster. The reason I find Alec MacDonald so interesting is that he is the exact type of Storm forward we all think about when we think about Craig Bellamy getting lads into the Storm system. Josh King is probably the best example, and he's starting 13 for the Storm. He was barely making a dent. I think he was in the Knights before he went to the Storm, and he's just like fantastic every single week. He's replaced Dale Finucane, maybe not to that extent, but he's doing the same role. Alec MacDonald is that guy. Probably wouldn't be an NRL player at any other NRL club. But he gets into the Storm, he rips in, he's mobile, he's a smaller forward, lighter, but he's just all grit, all energy, and he wasn't playing last week against the Broncos. This is interesting because I think the combination with him and Asafa-Solomona in the middle will be very important for the Storm. Asafa-Solomona is fantastic. He's destructive, he causes chaos, and he's big, he's massive, but he's also mobile, so there isn't any defensive liability with Asafa-Solomona, even when he's playing edge forward. But if you can sprinkle Alec MacDonald alongside Asafa-Solomona, that is a great little combination there. Because MacDonald's just going to be running everywhere, and you can kind of let Asafa-Solomona chill out a wee bit. So watch out for that. The Roosters, as I said, Ponga, Paulo, and you got Brandon Smith at hooker, Siwa Wong starting edge forward. Would be fantastic if Nofahu White Bay Roskell Jr. came off the extended bench onto the bench, but I don't think that will happen. Brandon Smith, he returns to Melbourne, that whole storyline. Playing up directly against Harry Grant's going to be very interesting. Watch out for Brandon Smith passing or offloading after he takes a run. A lot of hookers, they just run, they'll break a few tackles, they'll get tackled, they'll play the ball. Brandon Smith, whenever he runs, he's usually got an offload or a pass. So he creates chaos and then he shifts the footy. That's what I like about Brandon Smith. And then we've got Siwa Wong getting all sorts of buzz as well, rightly so. Monthly reminder, the Roosters, they don't have an NRL salary cap sombrero. They just have the salary sombrero. And Siwa Wong is a great example of this. The Roosters invest in the youngster. They fly him over. They get him into a first 15 college in Sydney, and if there's anything we know about rugby union outside of Aotearoa, it's basically an upper class sport. So you're getting into one of the best upper class schools in Sydney. That is the Roosters' salary sombrero. They fly players over to Sydney just to play SG ball. They put their players into the best schools. That takes money. That takes connections. That's why the Sydney Roosters are the Sydney Roosters. And Siwa Wong is he's out here. Fijian international, Burnham, Munyariwa Jr. He's doing great things at the Roosters as well. Just quickly, busy weekend of NRLW footy. I'll write about that tomorrow, so if you're interested, check it out. But we do have grand finals in Queensland as well. Under 21s, you got Brisbane versus Townsville. Townsville have Jeremiah Matautia Otara Jr. and Henry Tiutau, Maris Saints Jr. starting props. And they've been the starting props for Townsville under 18s last year, starting props this year. I think both of them also played Queensland Cup for Townsville this year as well. Brisbane have Tirani Woodman Tuhoro on the wing. He's from up north. I think it's Takahiwai Jr. They've also got Samuela Vakadula. He is a Bell Block Jr., which I believe is in New Plymouth. And Braden Siu Easthope. He's an Otahuhu Jr., I think off the top of my head. He is starting hooker. And the Brisbane Tigers, they are affiliated to the Melbourne Storm. So any player playing for the Brisbane Tigers, you're thinking they might be in the Storm system. Queensland Cup final. Burleigh have Keanu Kinney, Ken Mamalo. Shout out Keanu Kinney, he's so fast. His highlights from their big win in Queensland Cup semi-finals, excellent. They've also got Vaka Sikahali, who is a Munyariwa Jr. in the Titans system. And in the Brisbane Tigers, they've only got Levahu Pulu. And Alec MacDonald is named there, but I don't think he'll play. Unless there's some shenanigans with the NRL bench there. So that's Queensland grand finals. We've also got the Warriors in the New South Wales Cup. Whatever final you want to call it. They are playing the Bears. Winner goes into the grand final. All the regular dudes are named for the Warriors. We'll see how they go on Saturday. I believe it's a 4 o'clock kickoff in Australia. So that will be happening a couple hours before the Warriors play NRL footy. A little bit of cricket here. The Blackcaps, they got smoked by England overnight. All good. And Australia A basically smoked the New Zealand A team, and they've won the first 2 one-dayers of their 3-match series. So Australia's won the one-day series. Couple of key performances. Trent Boult returning to the Blackcaps. He's got 8 wickets in 2 games, averaging 11, 5.4 runs and over. He is the most economical Blackcaps bowler in the series so far, except for Mitchell Santner. Mitchell Santner's only played 1 game. So Santner's only played 1 game. Rachin Ravindra has bowled in all 3 games. So they're obviously trying to get some overs into Ravindra. That's all good. And a very interesting little nugget here. Will O'Rourke. He took 4 wickets for New Zealand A yesterday, and that was his first appearance in the one-dayers of this series. So he is now, he took 4 wickets in 1 game, and I think I said it in the subscriber podcast. Will O'Rourke's played 1 game in each series. So he played 1 game in the home unofficial test series earlier this year. He played 1 game in the unofficial test series just gone in Australia, and he's now played 1 game in the one-dayer series. And he's among the best bowlers for each of those series. And the thing about Will O'Rourke, he's taken at least 2 wickets in every innings bowled against Australia A. 2 wickets, 2 wickets, 2 wickets, 3 wickets, 4 wickets. That is lovely. That is gathering up the wickets. And one last nugget here. We've talked about it. We talked about it in the subscriber podcast as well. Will O'Rourke, Henry Shipley, Kyle Jamieson. That Canterbury seam attack is full with massive units. But they've also got Michael Ray, he looked pretty impressive in the one-days against Australia. So you got Michael Ray. He's been injected into that Canterbury seam attack. as well as the youngsters, Fraser Sheet, Zach Folkes. Sean Davey was excellent last summer as well. Maybe you get a bit of Matt Henry. Who do you select? Angus McKenzie. Like, there is a very realistic possibility that Canterbury start their season in Plunket Shield with, like, Henry Shipley, Will O'Rourke, depending on the Blackcaps schedule, Matt Henry and Kyle Jamieson. What's going on there? That is amazing. But the headline there is that Will O'Rourke is really, really good at bowling, and he's cut from the same cloth as a Henry Shipley, as a Kyle Jamieson.
Yeah, I'm guessing Plunket Shield will start around the same time as the World Cup, so Kyle Jamieson didn't get picked for the World Cup. So Kyle Jamieson's probably playing those games, and that's their second 11 is going to be better than some teams' first 11s. The depth of seam bowling that they've got. I mean, like Daryl Mitchell or someone might pop up for a game or two now and then. And I know he doesn't bowl a lot at international level, but he's pretty handy at the domestic front with the ball.
Well, you chuck Ish Sodhi, the spinner.
Yeah, of course. I forgot he moved there too.
He's your leading spinner, and you've got Jamieson, O'Rourke, Shipley, Henry, whatever else. That is crazy.
Yeah, that's not even fair. I was going to watch the start of that Blackcaps, the third ODI, because it started at 11:30, which I think means it must have been a day game in England, but I didn't because I forgot it was on and went to sleep. And sort of glad I didn't because it looks like Ben Stokes just like they lost by 181 runs and Ben Stokes scored 182. So I guess you can say he was the difference. But sometimes someone like Ben Stokes just does crazy things and you're probably not going to chase 368. So it doesn't really matter what happens after that. Other than the fact that, as you say, Trent Boult did take 5 wickets at less than a run a ball economy for a team that went at like nearly 7.5, or I think probably was 7. It was 7.64 run rate, and Bolt's was more than 2 runs better than that, and he took 5 wickets. So you can safely say he's miles ahead in terms of the best performer there. But that's also like Kyle Jamieson, Ben Lister are playing. They didn't seem to pick a fifth bowler, so Phillips and Ravindra and Mitchell all got overs. Like, that's not Blackcaps at their World Cup peak. That's Blackcaps working out a few of their depth World Cup options and then just letting some of these other guys get reps for, whatever. Ben Lister to get 3 wickets, but he went for nearly 7s. But Trent Boult is now up to 195 ODI wickets.
Sorry, they're taking the piss. That's what it is. They're taking the piss.
Yeah, well, if you want to put it more bluntly, that's certainly a phrase you could use. But yeah, I was looking at that because for a while there, it looked like Trent Boult was just going to end with 180. I think it was 187. You see, he's got 8 wickets on this tour. 187 ODI wickets as one of our best ever ODI bowlers. That didn't quite seem fair. Now he's going to get this little surge, and it seems like he's probably going to hit 200 before he even gets to the World Cup. So that's going to take him up. It should put him in top 5. I can't remember what the list looks like. I know Vittori's number 1, and then I think it's like Kyle Mills, Tim Southey, and they're the top 3. So Bolt's going to push himself up there nicely, which is good for the old legacy. Glenn Phillips was the only player who scored more than 30, and he scored 72 at a strike rate of 94s for a team that was crumbling around him. So it's good continuation of his sharp form. But I did watch quite a bit of the New Zealand A stuff yesterday because they've been on Sky, and I just had it on in the background while I was finishing off Flying Kiwis. So I actually watched a lot of. I turned it off when they started batting. I mean, when the Kiwis started batting and just losing wickets everywhere. But did watch a lot of Will O'Rourke there, and I tell you what, he's got some zip. He's got some zip, that's for sure.
It looked a bit faster than what I've seen in like the New Zealand conditions and the New Zealand scorecards.
Nice hard Aussie wickets for you.
Like, and he moves the ball as well. Like all those dudes, Jamieson burst onto the scene with these hooping in-swingers. I've talked about Henry Shipley's kind of quirky action and how that helps him get a little bit of swing, a little bit of nibble off the pitch. Will O'Rourke is tall. I don't think he bowls fast. I think he bowls fast enough, so it might be 135 to 140 Ks on a good day, but he moves the ball. all those dudes have a bit of funk in their bowling with how they can extract movement from conditions, and it was a pleasure to watch them. I'm not reading too much into the team's performances here, especially when Australia, their batting lineup was a bit crazy. Like Renshaw,
Yeah, they were stacked.
Philippi, Ashton Turner's great as well. And the Blackcaps, the New Zealand A team, haven't scored too many runs. Nick Kelly is the only Kiwi batter who has scored over 50 runs in the 2 games so far. But also Michael
Tom Bruce has back-to-back Golden Ducks.
Yeah, what's doing there? The best batter.
Yeah.
It's interesting getting a bit of a gauge on the Aussie commentators, apart from their cricket tales. You can learn a few things about the cricket folklore in Australia listening to those commentators, so shout out to them. They go a bit hard on it, but they love it. They love Will O'Rourke. They love Tom Bruce, so that's good. Nick Kelly's the best fielder in the world according to them, so shout out to him. Two things. Michael Ray, he's the leading wicket taker for New Zealand A, 5 wickets. I'm not sure if he actually got a contract with Canterbury. I might have to double check that. You might be able to double check it on the fly.
I'll have a peek, yeah.
But he did move from Otago to Canterbury. And if you do have a Canterbury seam attack of Jamieson, Shipley, Will O'Rourke, Matt Henry, Michael Ray's not playing. So he moved to Canterbury and he might not even crack their first tier seam attack because of their depth. However, he is performing well in Australia A as a sneaky little example of his talent and his craft. And while you're still looking that up, so the players who have played 3 games for the Blackcaps against England, Daryl Mitchell, Devon Conway, Will Young, and the players who have bowled in 3 games, Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra, sorry. So the 2 part-time spinners there. Seems like they're taking the piss a wee bit. But my point here is that Aditya Ashok, apparently he got injured in the first game against Australia A. So the New Zealand A team, they haven't had Ashok as their spinner. He hasn't bowled in the series yet in the one-dayers. So Dean Foxcroft is the leading spinner for New Zealand A. He's bowled 12 overs. He's got a wicket at an average of 90, conceding 7.5 runs and over. He's not dominating. He's bowling all right. But it's a good opportunity for Dean Foxcroft to really flex out his bowling because he is the leading spinner in this team unless Ashok returns to action, which basically means the main spinners for Kiwi cricket right now are Rachin Ravindra, Glenn Phillips, and Dean Foxcroft. Hallelujah.
Shout out to the part-timers. Michael Ray did get a contract with Canterbury Cricket, probably helped by the fact that Jamieson and Henry have central contracts with the Blackcaps, as does Sodhi, so there's a bit of room there.
Wait, do you have that list?
Yeah, Chad Bowes, Matt Boyle, Leo Carter, Sean Davies, Zach Folks, Mitch Hay, Cole McConkey, Angus McKenzie, Ed Nuttall, Ken McClure, Will O'Rourke, Michael Ray, Michael Rippon, they're the 2 new ones, Fraser Sheet and Henry Shipley.
Yeah, so I think most of their seamers do have contracts, and it's at least 7 or 8 seamers in that list. And shout out Michael Rippon. He's not playing any cricket for New Zealand A at the moment after flirting with a bit of Blackcaps cricket in recent years. But if you have any further observations about Kiwi cricket, otherwise we'll slide into football.
Yeah, let's slide into some football then.
We do have a flurry of Wellington Phoenix signings. There was a young lad named, promoted from the academy system. You've been on top of the Wellington Phoenix Academy for a while now, and it does seem like the men, a lot of their signings are promotions from the academy system. And then we had Annalie Longo signed as a professional for the Phoenix woman, and there's a bit of a USA tinge to the Phoenix woman signings. I don't think Betsy Hassett's going to be playing for the Phoenix. Is that correct?
No, I think Annalie Longo is effectively the replacement. Your veteran football Ferns midfielder, she comes in and does the job that Hassett would have done because Hassett has been playing she did go back to her old team in Iceland, where she's been playing some Champions League qualifiers recently. And from what I gather, the Phoenix have finished their squad now. They've got 22 players on board, and there's no room for Hassett. Longo just takes her spot. Fair enough. It's pretty much like for like on and off the field there, so no dramas.
Is that a fair assessment of how each team's kind of signing? The men promoting from their academy, the women going abroad to sign like certified pros, which I think is pretty good for the women's team, just getting experienced professionals into the mix. Have I read that correctly?
Well, the Knicks women have signed a couple of what do you call it? Like their own academy players. Their scholarship players are all academy. There's 4 players in that 22 player squad. The 22nd of which hasn't been announced yet. That's going to probably, unless she fails a medical or something, is going to be Riley Foster, who is a Canadian goalkeeper, former teammate of Michaela Moore's at Liverpool. Interesting story too with her, because she had a car accident a couple years ago and broke her neck in like 8 places and was lucky to survive, and is now on the comeback a couple years later with the standard, like, whenever someone has a serious injury, there's always some doctor somewhere that tells them you might never play again. Like, that just seems, the amount of sports stories I've heard that say that, it's like at this point it just comes with the territory. Someone's going to tell you you're never going to play again, and you're going to come back, and it's going to be the headline and the article about your comeback. But it's actually just a normal thing that doctors say, apparently, because they all say it. But when you've broken your neck in 8 places as a goalkeeper, I think that's one of the occasions where it's probably legit. But she has come back. She played quite well for Celtic, interestingly, as a trial player during their preseason, but they've failed a medical for a different reason. She had a knee injury. Now she's trying out with the Wellington Phoenix. So it's one of those like Gary Hooper type ones where she's probably better than the Phoenix ability, but injuries have meant that other clubs don't want to risk it. And so the Phoenix get brought into the mix. And they also have Brianna Edwards, who's a very good, she's in the current football Ferns squad. She's a very good option, emerging youngster kind of option. So they've got cover there. But yeah, so who else have we got from the academy? Macy Fraser was given a full contract. I think she's probably their academy's not old enough to really have others, but I guess you could count Emma Main as well, maybe Mickey Robertson, but definitely they've got a chunk of players who have been with the team from year one still hanging about there. But certainly, like, they've never signed an import player in their first 2 seasons, and now they're probably going to have 4 of them. That's definitely been a focus on how they're going to take this team forward and get a little bit more clinical, a little bit more like not finishing last would be nice. Whereas the men only seem to be signing academy players, which is a little bit of an issue. Isaac Hughes is the latest captain of the academy team. Real good. He was in the under-20 World Cup squad. I was, kind of thought that Lucas Kelly-Hield might have jumped the queue when he got a deal ahead of Isaac Hughes, but then Hughes has got one too now, so no dramas. And also have been super impressed by what Kelly-Hield did in the 2 FFA Cup games. That dude, he's 2 meters tall almost. Like, he's just a shade under. So he's as tall as like Peter Fulton, I think. They're exactly the same height. And he plays left back / center back, and he's tidy with his touch. You wouldn't expect a big fella to be tidy like that, but he's got a real classy left foot, which I like. But yeah, the only 2 signings that the Phoenix Blokes have made outside of their own academy promotions have been Muhammad Al-Tai, who's a sort of unproven defensive midfielder / fullback cover. Aussie fella, he's played about 20 odd games in the A-League. And Jack Duncan, who seems to be their backup goalkeeper. Like, that's it. They've lost players. They haven't replaced them other than with their academy guys. A little bit worried how that's going to look. They do still have an import spot available, and the signing of Hughes suggests they're not going to use it on an import centre back, which was their initial plan. Chiefy already kind of said that they'd gone away from that plan, and I think that's completely the right thing to do, because I don't think they need that more defensive cover. I think they need some help up front. And hopefully they will use that. Hopefully they will use that last import spot on a creative player of some description, because I do think they need that. It's relying a lot otherwise on players who didn't deliver for you last year doing the exact same job. And also Oscar Zavada, who did deliver last year, but like, can he have another season at that level when everyone knows he's the only focus and they can probably just stick 2 defenders on him to mark him out of games? That's a lot to ask. You need that variety of attack. And as much as I like Costa Barbarouses and David Ball and these guys, there is definitely questions over whether they are the same players they used to be at the age they are now. And there's a huge gap between them and academy guys pushing through. But they're, unlike the women's team, they haven't finished their squad. They've still got a few spots to go. There will be a lot of pressure on Bozidar Krajev to be more consistent, certainly this year. He had a great start to the season and then was just less effective after that. And then who else is going to score some goals in there? Oscar Van Hadam's never scored an A-League goal. Ben Old has one and is dealing with an extended injury thing at the moment that he's trying to work through. And that's more or less it as far as their attacking options go. So they probably could use another midfielder, and they probably could use a couple more proven, goal scorers or creative players. A little bit concerned about how that goes, but there is a lot to like about what the women's team have been doing and the way they've got all their business is nice and tidy, sorted out now. They've got a full squad pretty much, possible exception of this goalkeeper, as long as that gets done. They're looking good. They've amped things up. They've got things more serious than ever before. They're definitely targeting victories. The men's team, it's not that they're not targeting victories, but it does feel like maybe that if you're going to promote this many youth players, that can come at the expense of immediate results. You know what I mean? It's a very un-Blackcaps way of operating, and I love the academy pathways. I love that stuff, but you do need to be signing from outside the squad as well if you want to be making a serious top 6 run.
There was also a sneaky little football Ferns squad that was announced. What interests you? What intrigues you about that football Ferns squad? I think they're playing Chile, and I think for a lot of people, they've completely forgot about the football Ferns, let alone the individuals who are now playing overseas. We've talked about the players who picked up really notable, significant transfer deals to bigger clubs in Europe, and how none of them are going to the USA. What was kind of the headlines in the football Ferns squad, and are there any players in that football Ferns squad who you've seen, observed, and learned doing really impressive things in the Flying Kiwis department after the World Cup?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think maybe one of potentially the most impressive in terms of actual performances. Like there've been some banger transfers, but as far as the performances, and some of those seasons haven't begun yet, or they're too early to say, but like maybe the most impressive over the last month or so has been someone who wasn't in the World Cup squad and is not in this squad either, which is Michaela Moore, who has just gone back to Glasgow City, has locked in under a new manager as well, which helps, has locked in a first 11 spot, has played all but one of their games, which was a midweek game where they rotated the squad a bit, just played 180 minutes in a couple of Champions League qualifiers. Glasgow City won both of them without conceding a goal. They beat Shelbourne of Ireland, and then they beat Gintra of Lithuania. Second time Lithuania's got a mention on this podcast today. And that means they're through into the second round of Champions League qualifying, which is a 2-legged affair. And if you win over 2 legs against whichever team you get drawn against, you're in the Champions League group stages. They, as the champions of Scotland, Glasgow City, I think, have the 4th best on the coefficient rankings. So the top 7 of the 14 teams on their side of the draw. There's another pathway as well, but on their side of the Champions League draw, the top 7 get seeded, so they'll play one from the other things. They might get Ajax, that's the worst case scenario. They might lose to Ajax, that's a tough one. But they also might get a team from like Cyprus or something, in which case Champions League group stages could be right there for the taking. Who knows? Michaela Moore had obviously a big setback of the 2019 World Cup, did her Achilles right before the tournament and had to pull out. didn't get selected, was the unluckiest one not to get selected for the 2023 edition, which was a lot to do with, last couple of years she hadn't played a lot. She'd had some injuries. That's kind of how it goes. The squad has too much depth to have to be picking players on merit from what they did 2 years ago now. But the comeback is on as far as that goes. Like everything's on that trajectory. As to the Ferns squad that did get picked, I think they've added an extra player, and there's I think 4 that aren't there from the World Cup. Aaron Naylor's hanging back to settle in at Bayern Munich. So Brianna Edwards comes in to replace her. Rhea Percival sitting this one out, just fitness and travel reasons early as she's working through preseason. Don't forget she's back from a long-term injury that she only just recovered for at the end of last season. So she's stepping back. Daisy Cleverley didn't get picked as well, which I think she might be dealing with a little bit of an injury because she didn't play for HB Kuj in their Champions League qualifiers. And someone else must have dropped out of that squad as well. Liz Anton, I think, was the other one. So in come Kate Taylor and Grace Wisniewski, who are training players, have been rewarded with full stints this time. And also comes, as mentioned, Brianna Edwards. And comes as well 2 fullbacks who didn't make it, Ellie Green and Grace Neville, who have both been playing a lot at club level in Europe at the moment. Relatively stock standard squad for the Ferns. They're working out a couple of depth options. It's a couple of senior players conveniently absent, and the kind of way that it's fine for senior players to be conveniently absent now and then for these kind of tours. No dramas. It is the start of a new World Cup cycle, but also the Olympics are next year, and Olympic qualifiers are at the start of next year. So you don't get a huge amount of opportunities to work through some of those players outside your squad. So it's always nice to see how that kind of stuff works. Let Grace Neville have another chance. She's been playing quite well alongside Paige Satchel, who made a debut for the same team at London City Lionesses to start their season. It is a little bit of a shame that they're not playing in New Zealand. It seems like that's the kind of thing you might have been able to bank on after the World Cup, but whatever. You just get some games in. One against Chile and then another one against Chile, but it's behind closed doors, so I don't know if that counts, and I don't know why that's happening. But Football Ferns staying active is the most important thing, just as All White staying active is also important, and we should get an All White squad soon too, because they've got a game coming up in the October transfer window, in the October international window against Australia in Brentford's home ground in England. So that's nice. I think they're playing Ireland as well. I think that might be the same window, unless that's in November. I didn't check, but we'll find out when that squad gets named, which shouldn't be too far from now.
Who are your best players right now, men and women, best New Zealand footballers?
As in most in form, or as in just the highest performing, like the top standard?
Some sort of combination of everything.
Right. Well, Abby Ursay just dragged her team to another cup final. They lost against her old club, actually, but she's been playing excellently lately. Should be high on that list. A few of them are out of season, so it's a bit hard to say. But I do think Katie Bowen's move to Inter Milan is one of those ones that hammers home her sort of turning into a genuine first 11 key leader for the Ferns. I think that's a transition that sort of happened over the World Cup from being just a key regular to becoming one of their best players and a leader. Obviously, you can't not say Chris Wood, but I do think someone like Marko Stamenic it's hard. It's easy to underestimate because Serbia is not a league many people follow, but he's playing every week for the best team in Serbia, and they're going to be playing Champions League group stages in a couple of weeks, and their first game is against Manchester City, who he's already played twice against, which is going to be weird because his first five Champions League appearances, assuming he doesn't get injured or drop before that first game, will therefore 3 of them will have been against Manchester City, which is at a time where Manchester City are the best team in Europe. So they're learning all about him. I'm sure that Pep Guardiola's got the scouting report out on Marko Stamenic, but he's high up on that list as well.
Stamenic
might get 2 men and 2 women. I don't know.
He might get a call up for City. He might get the promotion.
Guardiola's transfer, yeah. They drew with them last year. There was a 0-0 draw when they played away in Copenhagen, and Stamenic played that game. So
it does seem like especially football, if you put in some impressive performances against the big Donny club, then you're performing in the most visible arena for those scouts and for that club to see you in action. Stamenic is classy. He's got a bit of a who's that? Rodri.
Rodri, yeah,
Like
you know,
Stamenic isn't Rodri, but he plays a similar
he's in the
style.
mold.
He's a gritty kind of midfielder with a very silky passing game. Like that seems something that City might keep an eye on.
Yeah, tall defensive midfielders as well. Like tall physical defensive midfielders is definitely something that a lot of teams are quite interested in. Is having someone who not only can do the intricate passing stuff, but also can really just batter a team. You know, just physically get in there. And that's a valuable thing. He's got a great profile, as the scouts would say, and you know, nothing is the industry that goes around scouting in a lot of sports, like you think about college basketball and stuff like that, is wild. Nothing gets scouted more deeper or sort of intricately than European football, though. Like if he's playing for in the Champions League, people who need to know about him will know about him. That's for sure.
It is interesting. Like the best players you mentioned, I actually said Football Ferns, and Abby Erceg doesn't play for the Football Ferns. She's retired from Football Ferns duty. But it is interesting.
Yes.
As you say, who are the best? Let's say who are the best Kiwi footballers, men's and women's, right now? Well, one of them doesn't play for the Football Ferns, so it's a bit out of sight, out of mind for regular football fans in Aotearoa. The other one, Marko Stamenic, not many, maybe casual football fans and Kiwi sports fans will think that Marko Stamenic is one of, if not the best Kiwi footballer in the world right now. So it is an interesting idea where sure, he might not be as good as Chris Wood, but at least top two contenders for this honor. They're kind of sneaky. They're a bit undercover. They're a bit low key. Erceg's not playing for the Football Ferns, and Stamenic is just going about highly consistent quality mahi in the Serbian league, playing Champions League.
Yeah, and more obvious candidates for that, like Joe Bell and Libby Kakache, for example, just haven't. We'll see how Kakache goes this season because he had a bright start, but this team sucked, and then he got dropped when they played Juventus. So I don't know how that's going to go when they come back out of the international window. But he's not played heaps over the last year. Like he's played enough at a very high level to sustain that, but it's also like he's not doing what Stamenic is doing, playing every single week. And Joe Bell just wasn't playing at all for Bromby until he's moved to Viking now. Moved back to Viking. So like some of the obvious guys who you might have said is they've had like it's not car crash kind of stuff, but they've had the odd like little speed bump in their careers, normal stuff that happens. But yeah, Stamenic is probably just rolling on the up and up. He's been doing more than those guys. Like he's unreal what he's been achieving, and it has snuck under the radar to some extent. And I can't wait to see him just do this like in a team with those guys for the All Whites because, yeah, I don't know. Them Aussies not going to know what hit him soon. At Brentford Stadium, whatever it's called.
With the Kiwi Rodri controlling the midfield.
The Kiwi Rodri, yep.
That's what you need. Rightio. Good podcast, good niche cast. Big up yourself. Enjoy the Aotearoa sporting action. Make yourself heard, make yourself known. We appreciate everyone being here with us, however you're getting it, on the YouTube, on the podcast platforms. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.